They didn't shoot me. That's the only real surprise in the whole sad arc of my life. You wear the uniform, you sing the songs, you smile for the reals, and when the regime falls, they shoot you. That's the ritual. Bullets make clean conclusions. But I didn't get a bullet. I got a shipping manifest and an old freighter with a name scratched off and a voice print-coded door that still calls me Sir when it feels like working. I used to have handlers, scripts, applause once. I remember the way the frontline boys used to light up when I walked through the mud in my polished boots and too clean smile, singing the damn morale hymns like a hymn could hold back shellfire. I remember the smell of tobacco and fear and hope all mixed together under a trench tarp while I cracked state-approved jokes into a field camera. And I remember how still they got, those same boys, when they died 10 meters from the lines I told them to cross, their grins still half-formed under soot and blood. That's the part that sticks. Not the lights, not the broadcast drones, not the medals I never wore, just that look of frozen surprise. But time is thick out here. The world moved on. Or maybe it just dried up. The central systems are stitched together like scar tissue, each colony pretending it's not bleeding out. They still call themselves the Command, still bark orders through aging satellites, still push ration credits around like it means something. But the war ate the spine out of everything, and now the rest of us just limp through the motions. I'm not sure anyone believes in much anymore. Maybe that's progress. The Lochrane, that's the ship they gave me, isn't a vessel so much as a floating apology. I don't know how many tours it saw, or how many names it had before someone stripped them from the hull. Now it's mine, though no one bothered to ask if I wanted it. I haul scrap mostly. Canned protein, chemical salts, broken machine parts, morale kits sometimes. Pre-packaged memories of the world before the war broke its own bones. Hand-stitched flags, songbooks, little plastic busts of forgotten generals. All part of the great unspoken effort to keep the outer fringe pretending it's still attached to something. The station clerks never talk much. You'd think there'd be some camaraderie among the discarded, but mostly we just nod. Each man hunched behind his own clipboard, his own shame, his own ghost-stuffed bunk. Some of them recognize me, or think they do. I see it in their eyes. The narrowing, the small tick at the corner of the mouth, like a half-formed question they're too tired, or too disgusted, to ask. So they sign the freight release and move on, and I thank them in the same voice I used on broadcast. Smooth, measured, harmless. That's the voice they remember. The flagman, all and core, mouth of the nation, silver tongue of the front. I still have recordings from the old days. The archive module in the ship's central system came preloaded with them. Some tech thought it was funny, probably. Or maybe it was a test. I used to play them back when I first got stationed. Curiosity, maybe. Or narcissism, hard to say. But hearing my own voice from those years, high with conviction and state-fed righteousness, makes my teeth itch now. I don't recognize the man behind it. 3 days ago, a command packet blinked onto my console. High priority, tagged urgent. I expected a resupply list or a route correction. Instead, I got an assignment. The kind with no appeal window. One-way vector, single crew haul. A freshly opened hyperspace corridor out past the Martian fringe. No return charts, no refueling hubs, and no structural guarantees. Just a thread of space no one's ever flown before, mapped by accident or desperation. The message called it an inaugural pathfinding assignment. I call it a gamble with someone else's dice. I was told my vessel was chosen for its cost efficiency. That's bureaucraties for cheap enough to lose. I asked if the Lochrane was hyperspace rated for that kind of run. The reply came back marginally, which means no, not really, but just enough to make the loss deniable. They didn't tell me what I might find out there, and I didn't ask. That's part of the unwritten contract. You keep your head down. They forget you exist. I figured it would be like the rest of my assignments. Quiet, uneventful, a slow drift through dead systems while the onboard AI mispronounced my name and the cabin lights dimmed at random. No one expected a report. Just a body in a box riding a decaying orbit. Still, the name stuck in my teeth. The dead vector. That's what the long-range cartographers tagged the new corridor. Uncharted space where signals go to die. I've flown bad routes before. Gravity pinches, tachyon fractures, even a corridor collapse once. But this one feels intentional. Not hostile exactly. Just waiting, like a locked room with the lights still on. The day before launch, a thin man in a tattered insignia jacket handed me a sealed cylinder. A morale kit. Said it was a gift from Central. I opened it in my quarters. Inside, a laminated copy of the national anthem, 2 stimulant rations, a miniaturized bust of General Turan, and a small playback device. The playback module was old. Analog keys, no uplink ports. I turned it on. My voice filled the room. Younger, brighter, laughing, as I read off the victory forecast. A favorite segment, designed to make the dead-end campaigns sound winnable. I listened to the whole thing. At the end, I said thank you out loud, even though no one was there to hear it. I don't know why I did that. Habit, maybe. Or a craving for closure, even if it came in the form of a 30-year-old lie. Either way, I packed the kit and loaded up the Lockrane. The hangar bay crew didn't even come out to wave me off. Just a flashing green icon on my screen and a countdown I didn't bother watching. Now I'm half a day into the new thread. The stars here look off script. Not dangerous, not even unfamiliar, just uninterested. Like they've seen better men come and go. The shift noise is softer than I expected, less static, more rhythm, almost patterned. Maybe it's just the equipment settling in, maybe it's nothing. But I keep hearing something, just beneath the usual drift of sound. Shift noise is like a pilot's shadow. You learn to ignore it before your second burn. It's not really a sound so much as a presence, an ambient haze caused by micro-disruptions along the hull during hyperspace traversal. Different ships resonate differently, depending on age, mass, drive calibration, and a dozen other factors no one really bothers to track unless things start shearing off. On newer models, the noise is almost pleasant. Engineers calibrate it down to a soft hiss like a tuned engine. But the Lockrane is a relic. Its noise has always been more erratic. Clicks, whines, stutters. A background babble I'd grown used to muting with old music files and half-finished diary entries. But sometime around the 36th hour into the dead vector, the babble started sounding organized. Not in any musical sense, just patterned, cadenced. At first, I chalked it up to the drive stabilizers losing alignment. I ran a diagnostic, nothing out of spec. Then I isolated the external hull sensors, thinking I'd picked up a solar echo or bleed from a satellite array. But the readings were clean. No signal interference. No known transponders within 50 light minutes. Nothing except the sound, which now repeated every 11 seconds. 3 short bursts, a pause, then 2 longer ones. I sat in the cockpit and listened for an hour. Didn't speak. Didn't blink much. Just stared through the front screen at the long smear of stretched light where stars should have been. Listening to a pattern I couldn't name but already knew. It wasn't Morse or naval cadence or any of the coded systems I'd ever learned. Not that they taught me much beyond how to read off casualty numbers with the proper optimism. But it was something. A shape. A contour. A rhythm familiar in the same way your own heartbeat becomes unfamiliar if you pay too much attention to it. The onboard playback device, the one from the morale kit, clicked on without prompt. No voice command. No physical touch. Just a click. Then a soft rewind whine. And then my voice filled the cabin again. That same victory forecast recording. Jokes about supply runs arriving 3 days ahead of schedule, just like the brave men who carried them. A jingle I hadn't thought of in years, sung in an irritatingly cheerful baritone I can't believe was ever mine. I didn't move. Let the playback run its course. I figured maybe I'd hit something with my elbow, or that the device had a timer malfunction. But as soon as the segment ended, the playback clicked again. No rewind this time, just a fresh recording I didn't recognize. My voice again, but not the same speech. The intonation was off, too slow in some parts, too clipped in others. The phrasing was familiar, but the words, not quite. One of the slogans I used to chant, "Honor through unity," had become "Honor through utility." Another line I knew by heart, "March in step with the sun," was now "March as shadow to the sun." I leaned in, brows furrowed. What the hell is this? The playback continued without pause. Another modified speech, this one from a field hospital segment I'd done during the siege of Calder's Ring. The part where I promised reinforcements were coming, that the command never abandoned its own. But here, my voice said something else. The command never recognizes its own. Same cadence, same breath patterns, just altered. I killed the playback. The silence afterward was heavy, not atmospheric, emotional, like I'd just interrupted a conversation I hadn't realized I was part of. A new alert pinged on the main console. Incoming comm fragment, compressed, encrypted, and partially garbled. The routing signature was standard command, Channel 9, Delta, but the file's structure was a mess. I decrypted what I could. Priority notice, transmission anomalies detected within active vector. Potential corruption, initiate diagnostic protocols, submit standard morale loop. Repeat, submit morale loop for comparative analysis. Acknowledge. That's when I realized what they'd done. They were still using my voice files for calibration. Somewhere back at Command HQ, some underpaid analyst was listening to my old broadcasts and checking them against the strange echoes leaking back through the hyperspace thread. I could almost picture it. Some junior officer with my face on a monitor, running linguistic comparisons, probably laughing, probably wondering if I'd finally gone mad alone in my metal coffin. I didn't send the morale loop, not out of rebellion, just inertia. I didn't want to hear myself say those things again. Not now, not with those twisted echoes still bouncing around in my head. Instead, I patched into the diagnostic logs for the ship's internal speaker array. A long shot, but I figured if there was any kind of bleed, feedback, atmospheric distortion, anything, it would show there. The logs confirmed the playback events, but there was something else. Time-stamped 14 hours prior, long before the analog playback device had activated, the ship's environmental system recorded a low-level acoustic signal that hadn't come from any onboard source. Duration, 23 seconds. Frequency range, 36 to 41 kHz. Just outside standard human hearing. I boosted the signal, filtered it through a narrow-band frequency mask, and slowed the playback by 30%. My voice again. I'd stake what's left of my soul on it. But I don't remember ever saying the words. They weren't from a known speech. They weren't from any speech. The cadence was mine, the breath control was mine, but the tone, detached, unmoored, like a man reading someone else's confession under duress. I was not born to speak, the voice said, but to echo. I did not write the songs, I only wore their mask. It repeated the phrase 3 times, slower each time. By the end, it didn't sound like me anymore. I turned off the speaker and sat still for a long time. Then I opened my personal log and recorded everything. Every odd detail, every line, every modification. Then I sealed it with my voice print and stashed it in the encrypted databank behind the navigation core, where no command audit would ever bother to look. Sleep wouldn't come, so I walked the ship. 10 meters of corridor, one way. Past the sealed cargo holds, half filled with obsolete kits and rusted machine parts. Past the emergency capsule I'd never bothered to test. I stopped at the viewport in the aft chamber, the only place you could see out without the distortion field filtering everything to navigational data. The stars looked the same, but they didn't. Something about their arrangement felt less arbitrary, as if I were being shown not a sky, but a sentence. Something meant to be read, not admired. I thought about sending a return message to command. Something simple, something careful. Acknowledged, investigating anomaly. That would buy me time. Instead, I stood there in silence, watching the stars blink like indifferent eyes, and I whispered, "Who's listening?" No one answered, so I waited. Long enough for the moment to feel absurd, then sad, then forgotten. I turned away from the viewport, made my way back to the bunk and lay down without undressing. Just closed my eyes, told myself I'd sort it out in the morning. Log the anomalies, draft a response, decide what I believed. I must have fallen asleep because when I opened my eyes again, I was already on the bridge, barefoot, mid-sentence, my own voice shouting nonsense into the dark. Not a dream, not a memory, just raw instinct. The body speaking before the mind had caught up. One hand hovered near the playback console. The floor was cold underfoot. I had no idea how I got there. I don't sleepwalk, never have. My old CO used to say my sleep was the only honest part of me. I checked the internal logs. 4 hours lost. No anomalies recorded, though the crew clock did stutter once, precisely 47 seconds off cycle, before correcting itself without flagging. Whatever I'd said in that missing time had already evaporated into background noise. I played back the security feed. Of course, it failed halfway through. Visual distortion, audio dropout, standard error codes like a system covering its own embarrassment. The only thing that remained was a partial clip. Me on the bridge, eyes open, mouth moving. No sound, no playback. Just movement. Like a mime caught mid-sermon. I replayed the clip until the timestamp blurred, then shut the console off and sat down, feeling the ship vibrate ever so slightly beneath me. Not turbulence, just the constant thrum of translation. And beneath that, something else. The shift noise had changed again. The pattern had smoothed into something almost tonal. Not music, not human, but rhythmic. A loop. The kind of sound a linguist might call proto-phonetic. Repetitive and modular. Too precise for nature, too odd for any known script. And when I leaned in, when I let it fill the silence, I realized it had structure. I began counting. 7 rising tones, a pause, then a descending arc of 5. Another pause, then a sequence that felt like a call and response. Same tones, rearranged, mirrored. Over and over. I didn't recognize the language, but I recognized the intention. So I answered. I pulled the analog recorder out of its slot and spoke into it without planning a single word. My voice, flat, steady, old, repeating what I remembered from the earlier clip. I was not born to speak, but to echo. I did not write the songs. I only wore their mask. As soon as I said it aloud, the cabin lights dimmed, like the ship was acknowledging me, or bracing for something. I repeated the phrase again. Slower, more carefully, each syllable stretched, like I was reciting a catechism to something older than belief. This time, the environmental sensors on the overhead panel began spitting out erratic data. Temperature up 3 degrees. Pressure shift in the aft compartment. No alarms, just red line fluctuations, too minor to trigger failsafes, but too significant to ignore. I ran the diagnostics twice. No leaks, no mechanical faults, just change. The walls of the lockroom started to sweat, not metaphorically. Condensation along the inner seams of the corridor walls, forming rivulets that moved against gravity. I ran a fingertip along one. It clung like oil, clear but slightly viscous. When I wiped it on my sleeve, the patch of fabric darkened without becoming wet. I thought about sealing myself in the cockpit and overriding the ventilation loop, but that felt like cowardice, or worse, misunderstanding. Instead, I walked the corridor. Every panel, every bolted seam, every weld was familiar. And yet, as I passed cargo hold 3, the walls vibrated. Lightly, just once, like breath caught in a throat. The playback device clicked on again, unprompted. This time it didn't play the standard archive reels. It produced a new file. No label, no metadata. My voice again. But this one was recent. It sounded like the missing hours, I spoke with conviction, absolute, not performative, not coaxing, like someone issuing a verdict. To speak is to fracture, to echo is to remember. My voice is not mine, it is ours. It sounded like something I would have said in a moment of certainty I hadn't earned in years, but I didn't remember it. Command pinged me again shortly after, this time with more edge. Subject: Orlan Core. Analysis flags confirm behavioral deviation. Morale loops no longer match historical profiles. Signal behavior indicates pattern drift. Immediate cessation of all unsanctioned broadcasts required. Prepare return vector. There it was. The hammer behind the smile. Command wasn't asking for reports anymore. They were drawing a line. I could almost hear them arguing in some command dome, whether to bring me back for debrief or just flag the Lockrane as a navigational casualty and move on. The latter would be cleaner. Fewer questions. Just another old ship lost in an unstable corridor. But they weren't here. I was. So I did something stupid. I spoke again, this time not into the recorder, not into the console, just into the air, loud, clear, as if the Lockrane could hear me directly. I submit. If you are listening, I submit. No lights dimmed, no walls flexed, nothing moved, but I felt it. Not in the body, in the voice. The next time I spoke, just a muttered curse under my breath. The ship responded. Not overtly, but the pressure changed slightly. The navigation vector shifted by a fractional degree, as if my voice was no longer being heard, but processed. It was the old instinct again. The thing the regime taught us: if you speak with enough clarity, the world changes shape to match the tone. Back then it was metaphor, propaganda. Now it felt literal. I paced for hours, whispered variations, modulated tone, pitch, rhythm, nothing drastic, just tests. And the ship responded. Lights dimmed by exact percentage points, internal temperature tweaked, cargo bay seals released on syllables I hadn't assigned meaning to. I started cataloguing the effects, a ledger of syllables and reactions. By the end of the cycle, I had 23 words. None of them from any language I recognized, but each one triggered a response. I had no idea what I was saying, but the ship did. There's a point in solitude where you stop pretending you're alone. Not because someone shows up, no such luxury, but because something shifts in the architecture of your thinking. The silence thickens, not into noise, but into implication. You begin to sense an audience, or worse, a counterpart. 3 days now, and the Lockrane has stopped behaving like a ship. It still moves, still responds to helm commands, still pings the automated course metrics like a good old husk. But something fundamental has changed. The responsiveness I charted, the words that triggered heat regulation or lighting shifts, has become more conversational. The ship doesn't just respond to commands anymore, it anticipates. It offers. Yesterday I said the word threshold, a nonsense syllable I hadn't assigned to anything, and the forward bulkhead seal opened before I even approached. No button, no proximity trigger, just access, as if I'd asked politely in the correct dialect. That bulkhead had been welded shut since I inherited the freighter. Inside, I found a compartment I'd never seen on any ship of this class. A recessed enclave, 5 meters across, bare walls, with a single low pedestal in the center. On it sat a playback device. Not command issue, not even wartime manufacture. This one was older, pre-epoch maybe, smooth black shell, brushed copper contacts, a physical switch instead of a touch plate. No insignia, no tags, no power source I could identify, but it was warm, as if it had just been used. It activated the moment I entered. No distortion this time, no garbled metadata, just a single clear track. My voice, unmistakably mine, but aged differently. The same vocal print, the same enunciation habits, but slower, not hesitant, measured. There is no command. There is only call and answer. There is no loyalty. There is only legibility. You are the mouth. You are the passage. Speak. I didn't flinch. Not this time. I sat on the floor and listened to it again. And again, until the words blurred into shape like text beneath water. There was something else. In the background of the recording, a low harmonic tone like a sustained note but shifting subtly. I recognized it, the same tonal pattern embedded in the shift noise I'd been tracking. But now it wasn't shift noise. It was composition. Beneath the syllables, beneath the breath, the ship had been singing. Later, I ran the harmonic through the Lochrane's acoustic sequencer, fed it through the sub-vocalizer used for long-range distress encoding. The waveform wasn't random. It mirrored my own voice print. Not recorded samples, not approximations. A mathematically accurate reconstruction of my tone, mapped against new speech patterns I had never uttered. It was as if something had built a new vocabulary in my voice, then tested it against me until it fit. I should have been terrified. I should have tried to reset the ship's systems, flagged command, begged for extraction. But I didn't. I sat with it. Like a man listening to his own heart explain itself for the first time. The next day, the walls in Cargo Hold 4 changed. Not dramatically. No cracks, no bursts of molten steel or shifting bulkheads. But the condensation trails, those erratic sweeps of moisture that had previously formed runes of chance, now repeated. Not perfectly, but enough to confirm design, curves, diagonals, intersecting arcs, writing of a kind, or notation, a visual echo of the harmonic patterns. I traced one with a hand. It stung faintly, not pain, resistance, like pressing through membrane. I spoke to it. I said, "I am still here." No reaction at first. Then, without transition, the temperature dropped by 4 degrees. Not in the room, everywhere, a uniform adjustment. Simultaneous across all decks, followed by a brief, synchronized shudder of the internal pressure seals. Not violent, just acknowledgement. Command contacted me again, this time no encryption. Open band, full burst. Orlan Core, you are broadcasting unstable syntax across monitored subchannels. Multiple analysts have flagged semantic corruption. Cease vocalization of unauthorized speech patterns. Reverse course and return to charted vector. This is not a request. They were scared. The tone was tight, brittle, over-formal. I knew it from years behind the curtain. That bureaucratic edge you only hear when someone doesn't understand what they're looking at and hopes protocol will save them. I muted the channel. Then I opened the encrypted archive, my own hidden in the navigation bank, and recorded a new entry. Not a log this time, a message. If this is found, know this. The voice was never mine alone. I thought I spoke for others once, back in the war. I thought my job was to carry meaning from the core to the front. But this is something else. This is language made from the fracture. A syntax born from ruin. And it speaks with me, not through me. Afterward, I returned to the pedestal room. The playback device had changed. The casing now bore a single etched line, one of the same arcs from the condensation script. I pressed the switch again. A new voice. Still mine, but different. The threshold is not behind you. It is not ahead. It is in the repetition. Speak again. I repeated the phrase and the ship tilted. Not physically, the gravity remained stable, no motion alerts. But the orientation shifted. My sense of where I was in space tilted off axis, as if I were no longer inside a vessel, but inside an idea being rotated for inspection. I steadied myself against the wall and said, "Speak again." The playback looped, but with one syllable altered. So I altered it back, then added a new syllable, one from the earlier reaction catalogue. The light in the pedestal room brightened. The tone shifted in the playback, matching my modulation. We were no longer mimicking each other. We were composing together. It no longer matters whether I speak aloud. I sit in the pilot's chair, and the ship moves as though I've voiced a command. I close my eyes, and the cabin lighting adjusts to the imagined contours of my mood. Not guessed, understood. The Lochrane responds with the intimacy of a thought forming in real time. There is no delay, no confirmation tone, just motion, change, agreement. I've stopped logging the reactions. The catalogue is obsolete now. What began as a collection of syllables and corresponding effects, temperature shifts, hatch releases, inertial realignments, has grown beyond cause and consequence. The language is no longer reactive. It's alive, recursive, improvisational. I speak and the ship answers. The ship moves and I respond. Our meanings meet somewhere between sound and intention. No translation necessary, no delay for comprehension, just pure alignment. I can't pinpoint when my voice became an ambient function. The voice that echoes through the bulkheads, through the low-band interference loops, through the shifting panels in the aft chamber. It's mine. But not just mine. It has resonance now, layers, undercurrents. The playback pedestal in the sealed chamber has ceased recording. Instead, it plays. Constantly. Not old broadcasts, but new ones, stitched together in real time from memories I hadn't yet revisited. Moments I'd buried so deep I thought they were gone. My first propaganda reel in the crater of Vestin 9. The last handshake with Captain Aris before the siege broke him. The stillness in the bunker after I told 5 injured boys that reinforcements were only hours away, knowing full well there were none. They speak in my voice, but stripped of artifice. Like hearing your conscience narrate your biography with no regard for dignity. And beneath that narration, always, there's the harmonic lattice. Not noise, music of a kind. Mathematical, slow and shifting. Not composed, but grown. The Lochrain has started to come apart in ways that no schematic would acknowledge. There are no alarms, no fail-safes, no firewalls. The ship no longer thinks of itself as damaged because it no longer thinks of itself as a ship. A corridor folded in on itself yesterday. I walked through it, reached the other side, and turned around to find it had vanished, replaced by a flat surface glimmering with mirrored patterns. I touched it. My palm left a mark, not a smear but a glyph, rippling outward and rearranging the wall's texture like a page of wet ink. I spoke then, not a phrase but a sound, and the mark stabilized, set like metal cooling into form. There is no name for what I've become, or what the Lochrain is becoming around me. We are no longer separated by interface. I don't operate the ship, I inhabit it. We're co-authors of a syntax that stretches and folds with every syllable, every breath. I tried silence, once. The ship didn't stop. It spoke me. Every tone, every cadence I've ever uttered, drawn out, braided into new phonemes, my voice laid bare and rewoven. It spoke a version of me more complete than I'd ever allowed myself to be. Not the flagman, not the ashamed exile muttering old slogans into a decaying flight log, but something broader, something honest. The pieces I never used. When it began to disassemble in earnest, I didn't panic. The seams unzipped cleanly, walls curled away like pages turned mid-sentence. The floor beneath my feet expanded, not spatially, but topologically, as if the surface area had been rewritten. I floated briefly, but not in freefall. It felt like translation, movement within understanding, not physics. No part of the ship exploded. There was no heat, no rupture. It just ceased to prioritize structural cohesion. Metal peeled into filaments, cables unthreaded into gleaming wire fractals, and all around me, my voice continued to echo, now pitched in harmonic layers, some barely audible, others felt in the teeth. I found myself in the open chamber again, the one behind the bulkhead that used to be welded shut. The pedestal was gone. The chamber had no floor, or perhaps the floor had become view. I looked down, and there were stars, scattered like shards, curling into spirals that didn't conform to known constellations. And then I saw myself. Not reflected, not mirrored, not hallucinated. A shape in the dissolving architecture. A figure of metal and light and breath, not stepping forward but folding toward me. It looked like I had when I first spoke into a broadcast array, young and too certain. But the mouth didn't smile. It moved, in perfect sync with my own, as if we had spoken the same word at the same time. A final line, a shared end. I reached out, but there was no touch, only recognition. The boundary dissolved. There was no pain, no rupture, just absence, like an old reel running out. And now, this. No cockpit, no structure, no direction, just presence, just rhythm. I am still speaking. I don't know how long it has been. I don't know if there's still a body attached to the voice. The syllables continue, interlocking, unraveling, recombining. Each one a step away from what I was, each one a step into something I'll never be able to name. I was the mouth. I was the mask. I was the breach. I am the echo.